Nice to see you, Professor.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. First of all, let me express my sincere gratitude for sharing your time. My name is Dr. Rustam Abdurraupov, and I'm the director of the Republican Graduate School of Business and Management. And I'm very glad to see you, to having you here. And I hope that we will have very fruitful conversation today, as I can see the research areas and your expertise will be very much valuable for our participants. And let me just briefly tell about your current position and about your research areas, and then I would love if you could just give a brief information about your background, and then we carry on with the questions, because I think there are a lot of things to discuss. However, today we will just limit with some of these questions, but I very much hope that it will be only the first interview, but not the last one, and there will be a chance to have you here in our business school in person. And so Dr. Manуэль Fernandes-Grela is a professor of economic analysis at the University of Santьяgo-de-Compostela. He holds a doctoral degree in economics, and he also works as a principal researcher in the Institute of Studies and Development of Galicia. And his research areas include development economics, regional development, clusters, and output analysis, history of economics, monetary and banking theory, and labor economics, which is quite interesting, I think. And so, Professor, could you please just shortly tell us about your background and about your experience, and what projects are you working right now on? Thank you.
Thank you. So, as you said, I'm an economist by background, and I work at the University of Santьяgo-de-Compostela. That is a very old university located in the northwestern part of Spain, in the region of Galicia. That is a small coastal region in Spain. So my background is basically working on applied policy matters, because when I work at the university, it's a research institute where we are trying to help a regional government to design and implement their policies, because our region in the context of the whole of Spain is a developing one, mainly agricultural and in the productive base, and so with a huge need to adapt to modern conditions. So we usually work very closely with our public authorities in this field, and also we have developed a wide net of international relationships, because development, of course, is an interesting topic in many parts of the world. So little by little, we started to cooperate with Latin American institutions. That is kind of an obvious target, because we share a common language in Spanish language. But then afterwards, we started to spread our network all around the world with the help of the funding of the European Commission and the external cooperation programs of the European Union. And this is how a decade ago we started to have contacts with countries in Central Asia. And these contacts initially took the form of PhD students from these countries coming to us for getting their PhDs. And this started to develop a wide network in your area. So currently we are helping a lot of our former PhD students to run their research projects in their home countries, and also participate in some cooperation programs in collaboration with the European Union, trying to create new training programs and academic programs all around the area.
Good. So we titled our today's topic as the estimation of policy impacts through simulation, what can be done for agricultural sector. And you know, it is notable to say that just yesterday there was one more decree signed by our president on additional measures to ensure compliance of indicators of quality and safety of agricultural products with international standards, which may be also one of the impact factors for the development of the agricultural sector and of the economy in general. So that's why the topicality of today's title increases even more. And so based on your previous policy studies in Central Asia, and specifically we saw that you have the works dedicated to the development of Kazakhstan. How do you evaluate in overall policies for the development in Kazakhstan? Because we are neighboring countries and we have a common history. And I think some of your conclusions and the insights will be valuable for our country as well.
Well, we have some experience working with Kazakhstan and helping them to research some areas that are related to their development policy. And as is well known, Kazakhstan development policies are really very ambitious. They do long-term planning on a large scale, and they are focusing on getting a lot of external help with that. So they consult a lot of international experts for that. The results of their policies are kind of mixed. Usually their strategies are really well thought and methodologically sound, but then practical obstacles get in the way. So the main problem with development policies in Kazakhstan is basically at the stage of implementation. And a good part of that also is related to the really high dependency that the Kazakh economy has about natural resources like oil and gas. So the main problem that we have found when we, several research projects, we have looked at the results of development policies in Kazakhstan is that it's very difficult to forecast what will happen with the price of oil. And when the price of oil behaves erratically, or as nowadays when it drops suddenly, then the problem is that many of the scenarios that were planned for the development policies cannot be implemented. And there are usually no plan Bs available in order to solve the situation. So mainly the response of Kazakh authorities is just to go back to the drawing board and so restart designing a new policy adapted to the new circumstances. And this creates some kind of intertemporal inconsistency in the development of their policies. The experience that we have working with them in the last decade is like they are continually restarting their policy. And this is, of course, detrimental to the effectiveness of the policies.
Good. And just regarding the policies and the, you know, I was informed that you have a prize on your contribution, or for the contribution of the development or the research on the Adam Smith's works. So
yeah.
Could you briefly tell us about this prize, or whatever it was?
No, what this really is something that I developed in the last 2 years as kind of a side activity, because in our region in Galicia, we have our own regional language, some minority language within Spain. And our university, in collaboration with some institutions, is trying to promote the education in economics and related subjects in our own language. That is kind of lacking. So they commissioned to me 2 years ago the task of translating the Wealth of Nations, the foundational work of economics, to the Galician language. And I finished recently this translation that now is published. It's the first translation of this work in our language. Is something that is having really an impact in our local circles. And it helped me also to realize that many of the policy recommendations that Adam Smith presented in the 18th century are incredibly alive today. So you can find lots of good advice reading these old works. And this is something that kind of surprised me, because the world has changed a lot in all these centuries. But you know, it was a really interesting project, and I think it showed us that really the basic insights that we have to apply in our field are clear and well established, because they have a history, they have a long trajectory. The problem is sometimes we tend to forget them temporarily.
Yeah, that is interesting to hear, because that was actually my next question. Because as you see, there are so many different situations that nowadays taking place, especially with the current pandemia, and with other volatilities that are happening all around the world. And I was going to ask you whether you think, as an expert in history of economics, whether the theories that our classical economists actually they were promoting them, and how do you see these theories to be implemented nowadays? So you have already started with these, with sharing your opinion, and what about the current situation?
Mm-hmm. Well,
I mean, the situation of when a lot of people are isolated, and they have to stay at home, and the international logistics are very much limited. And how do you think these situations may affect on these classical theories? And also, as my next question would be related to especially with these beginnings. So could you please share a bit of your insights?
Well, I have the impression that all these classical theories will be very important if we want to understand what will happen now, because the situation is really serious. I live in Spain. It's been one of the countries most affected by the pandemic, and in fact, I'm currently still quarantined at home. After 2 months of quarantine, this week we are starting just now to recover something resembling normal activity in some industries, but not in all of them. And what I'm perceiving about the current situation is that the thing that will make this crisis different for the ones that we lived before is that its impact is being terribly unequal. So this is not like the previous global financial crisis, where the activities that started the crisis were financial ones, and so affected more or less the whole fabric of the economies, of course, especially the financial sectors, but the financial sector deals with everyone in the rest of the economy. Here we are dealing with economies that are stopping, but not completely. Each country is applying its own rules to trying to stop the pandemic. So in some countries, some activities are stopping. In some others, there are other different set of activities that are the ones suffering the problem in different time frames, because the pandemic is spreading differently in different parts of the world, but also because authorities react with different speeds. So the final result will be terribly unequal. There will be parts of the population that really might end richer this situation than before, while others will suffer a lot. And the problem is that modern economics is not very well prepared to deal with these questions about distribution, about inequality. And in fact, I believe we will be forced to go back to the classical authors that in the first stages of the Industrial Revolution really saw these are first order problems that need to be solved. We, in the last few years, we tend to be kind of thinking in the frame that if we were able to engine very fast economic growth, distribution and inequality will be a secondary concept. But after this pandemic, I don't believe this can be sustained.
So, as far as I know, the research that you are doing with the for the Kazakhstan is still going.
Yeah.
And how do you think the results for something that you would like to suggest to Kazakhstan would this pandemic affect? So whether 3 months ago or 4 months ago, you would or now, would you recommend the same measures to be implemented in Kazakhstan, or what kind of changes would you see to happen so that now, because of some factors, well, we know what factors, but there may be some specific factors. Now you would recommend different things. So, what difference can you feel within these 4 months?
Well, the difference will be enormous, because the situation is totally changed. So I'm foreseeing that even the requirements of our project will have to be changed, because just to mention one very clear example, the original idea of agricultural policy in Kazakhstan is that they want to focus on the product that they are really strong, that is cereals, wheat. And of course, they consider this as a very important potential exporting product. And so the original problem was how to combine the exporting of wheat with importing all the other products that the country needs to guarantee their food safety that they cannot produce so efficiently in their country. But now what we find is that in the current situation, one of the first measures that the Kazakh government had to adopt was to stop exporting of wheat. Because in the current situation, they cannot even be 100% sure that they cannot guarantee the internal provision of wheat. That's a basic staple. So this changed completely everything, because this means that all the foreign trade orientation of the agricultural policies will have to be totally rethought. And the current starting point will be more like a starting point of autarky. So what can the country do with their own agricultural resources, how to extract the most of it, and then explore the possibilities of reopen international markets again. And this is an entirely different situation, and it's a situation that Kazakhstan is a country that is not well prepared to address, because one of the main problems for development policies in Kazakhstan that I did not mention before, but is also important, is that still there are traces in the productive structure of Kazakhstan of the all heritage of the Soviet Union situation, where Kazakhstan was not an independent country, but a piece in a larger system of supply chain for the big Soviet market. So the problem is that the current situation forces many countries like Kazakhstan to look inwards, to contemplate the possibility that for some time they will have to go on what they can produce in a situation that is close to autarky, not in all sectors, but in some of them. And the agricultural is one of the main sectors that are suffering these problems.
Hello?
Oh, it looks like we are having connection problems.
Now it's fine. Because the picture was, yes, it seems like the picture was paused. So, and in your works, you have used simulation methods.
Yeah.
And just could you briefly describe this method? And because we also have doctoral students and the researchers who are right now just watching this interview, and I think that will be interesting for them. And have you tried measuring the impacts of the current pandemic using this method, and how you usually do it, just in general?
Well, we usually work with general equilibrium applied models, because the kind of work that we usually do is try to look at complex situations when we focus on things like the internal structure of production or questions about income distribution. So we need to have different sectors working all together and interacting. So for this, the methodology that we use is general equilibrium. As these models are very complex, it's very difficult to use them for doing statistical forecasting. So that's why we use simulation in order to get intelligible results from these models. Currently, of course, even if we are all working from home nowadays, the efforts of all our research institutions are going to trying to estimate what will happen after the pandemic. So we are trying to rely on the models that we have to try to get an idea of what will be the impact of the economic impact of the aftermath of our lockdown and quarantine measures. The problem with this is that this is terribly hard to simulate, because the simulation methods, the key base of them is that you are able to build credible scenarios. So you have to fix the levels, or at least the ranges of some variables that are not direct to your analysis, that are kind more of the environmental background of your model, and try to feed them with plausible values. This usually you can do when you are working on a stable environment, where you can take a look at all the econometric work that has been done, and getting the most agreed estimates about what will happen with all these variables. But this currently is very, very difficult, because the big factor here is the high uncertainty of the situation. This is something entirely new, and we don't even know how it will play out, because the problem is that there is still no consensus among the specialists that are the epidemiologists about what will happen. And this creates a problem, because we can build a model for a scenario that will be the aftermath of the current situation, under the reasonable assumption that the extension of the pandemic will gradually go down. This is feasible. We can very quickly, using the models that we have at our disposal, provide basic forecasts about the impacts for the whole economy, or for this. But the problem is that this scenario is really not entirely credible one, because many epidemiologists tell you that what we can expect, for example, in our part of the world, in Western Europe, is that in the autumn, or maybe in next winter, there will be a second wave of the virus. But the problem is that they don't know exactly when it will happen, which countries will be most affected, or even the extent to which the intensity of the second wave will be. And of course, small variations in all these parameters can change the results of the simulation exercise.
Definitely.
And make the results completely different. So the big problem that we are finding now is that the most that we can do is to create our simulations for the scenarios that we consider as most probable. While in a normal situation, we could present this as, okay, we are presenting this simulation for a scenario that has 19% probability of being the right scenario. Currently, we cannot even put numbers to this. So, we are optimistic. We think that the gradually solving of the situation will be the most reasonable scenario, but we don't know how accurate this forecast will be.
And how do you think this pandemic will affect on the young generation to choose their future professions? Because you see, we saw that there are a lot of professions actually that are not agile and are not very much sustainable in a particular situation, this kind of stressful situation. How do you think this will affect on decision-making process? And especially, you mentioned in the agricultural sector, so in case of Kazakhstan, they were exporting wheat, and now they have to change their overall policy and looking for the diversification of the internal food production in order to ensure the food safety of the country. And so do you think these kind of factors will affect on the decision-making processes?
Yes, the problem is to know how they will affect, because as I was saying before, we don't know exactly if we are facing a kind of a short-term shock. So we will live through this difficult situation for some months, and then gradually we will start to recover. or if this will be a more permanent situation. And of course, this will depend a lot on what can be done in the health and pharmaceutical sector. It depends on if we will end with effective vaccine for this virus or not. Because if the situation is permanent, of course, then the changes in the whole of the fabric of society will be enormous. And the type of world in which we have lived the last 2-3 decades will come to an end, because we will need to learn to live in a different way. Maybe we will have the help of technologies like this one that is allowing us to have this seminar today. But we will have to start to use it in an entirely different way, adapted to the situation. While if this is a short-term shock and we get some vaccine that allow us to, forget about social distancing and the need to keep ourselves safe, then of course, there will be an impact on decision making, because young people are living through this situation, I guess, in a better situation that older people do, because I'm sure they will adapt better to the situation, because for them is something that is new, but they don't have previous misguiding references to take off. The problem with the older people is that we are always looking for a previous situation that is similar to this, and the problem is that this situation has no similar precedent. So this is why I'm afraid that we will adjust much worse. But young people, I'm sure they will adapt, and of course they will change some of their decision making. Where I can see this more clearly, because of my working experience, is on the education sector. So I'm sure that this experience, even if it's solved relatively quickly in the following months, will change the way in which we teach and in which we research very, very sharply. And I hope it will be for the better.
Thank you. And so when you were researching Kazakhstan, have you looked at the region in general? I mean, in the region where the Kazakhstan is located, and in particular, because there are a lot of common things between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. So I'm leading to the question that if you have looked at the region overall, what do you think are the measures that would be valuable to be implemented in the region? So in the agricultural sector, in order to because the Uzbekistan is the half of the population of all the region is in Uzbekistan, and it is the most populated country in the Central Asian region. And so that's why if it's most, well, that's already says a lot. And we have a lot of the population growth rate is high, and most of the population, majority of the population, is younger than 35 years old. And it means that the consumption is also growing. And what do you think would be valuable measures now in order to overcome, or not overcome, but to minimize the effect of the current situation in the world?
Well, the region in which you are located is really very interesting region from the research point of view. We are used to work with this type of general equilibrium models in order to do simulation because they allow us to deal with complex interactions in the economy. And of course, one of the sources of complexity usually are the geographical ones. And in the case of your region, these are terribly important because your region in this sense is very particular. You have countries with very large borders, very large countries in general, with very different patterns of population. The population is concentrated in some areas because of geographical and historical reasons. It's very dispersed in other ones. So, this is a source of a lot of complexity. So, in fact, macroeconomic analysis is kind of very misleading in the case of your countries, because with the degree of variation within each one of your countries is very large. This is compounded by the fact that both geographically and historically, the different countries within your region have grown to be kind of basically complementary among them. But nowadays, they are independent states. And there are, depending on the conjunctural situation, internal and external factors, this complementarity sometimes can be exploited, but sometimes is not. So there are periods in the research history where there has been collaboration within the countries, and others in which collaboration has been much more difficult. And even sometimes there are local conflicts between some of your countries. And the problem is that when you think about all this type of large problems, like it might be nowadays the COVID-19 pandemic, many of the solutions that you can think of in terms of policies need of growing cooperation in order to exploit this complementarity. So this is really a way that I believe it will have to be explored in the near future. But it will have to be explored from a really interesting new perspective, because from the starting point, I believe this will be the first time in your recent history that really the starting point will be that each country will have to start from its own resources. And maybe this will facilitate things, because of course it's obvious that when you have the situation geographical that you have, the natural resources distributed that you have within the region, the first obvious answer to your question is, okay, there are a lot of things that have to be gained by cooperating among yourselves, because some of your countries are clearly consumers of some products, while the other countries don't have those products and have do have the products, but they don't have demand enough to create a good market. So I believe this is the first thing that comes to my mind. Yeah, and this can be applied both to the agricultural sector, to the energy sector, of course, to the manufacturing sector, even, because from your recent industrial history, you have very different manufacturing specializations also. And maybe in the case of Uzbekistan, you have a market large enough for the development of your industry, but this is not the case for the neighboring countries. So it would be clear that with increased cooperation, we could try to get the most of your natural specializations. So this is the old Adam Smith idea that the size of the market is the main spring of economic development. Yeah. So the first thing that seems obvious from the economic point of view is that Central Asia should be one large market. But then the problem is how to implement it in practice, because it's not life is not just economics. So there are other factors that we need to take into account.
Right. Well, we have one question from our participant, and if you allow me, I will let
Please
this person to speak, and then we'll see. Hello. Mr. Aziz, you are online, and we are giving you opportunity to ask question. No, I think he cannot turn off the mic. So let's see if we have other questions here. And the question is, when considering the impact of COVID-19 on agriculture and food, the big challenge is availability of data, and this is a new shock, and sometimes should pass before we can collect at least cross-section data. Do you believe simulation models offer alternatives, and how reliable they are?
Well, this is a problem in general when working with developing countries. Simulation models, and in general, any quantitative economic model is as good as the quality of the data with which you feed it. And getting data of good quality is very difficult. It's very difficult in developed countries, and in developing countries is even more difficult. So the problem here is to convince public authorities that investing in bettering the quality of the data and allowing access to this data on the part of researchers is a good investment. Because I have to say that while we try to do our best, and we try to complement all the official sources of data with our own surveys when we do research work in Central Asia, I cannot say that I trust 100% our results. And it's not because of the model or because of the methodology. Our biggest concern is about the quality of the data, because just by simple observation of reality, we know that a good part of the data with which we are forced to work is not good. So I believe that this is really something that maybe can be changed as a result of this pandemic, because I hope that the experience of what's happening in some of the Asian countries that are dealing well with this crisis will help governments understand that the countries that are doing well is because they are the ones that really are working with good data. Because, well, for what I'm seeing in countries like China or South Korea, they really have lots of data. They use it well, and this is because their public authorities invested in that previously. And this is a problem that, of course, as I'm saying, I find this problem a lot of times working in developing countries, but currently in my country, and Spain is nowadays a developed country, one of the richest countries in the world. I have to say that we are not dealing as well as we could do with this pandemic, because we are finding that we lack good data, that the systems that our public authorities have in place to collect and process quantitative information are breaking down under this situation. They are not good enough. So this is really a very important problem, but unfortunately, this is something that in countries like Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, it will be very difficult to deal with this if public authorities are not on the right side of the equation. Because the only other option to be able to have good data, if public authorities don't provide it, is you have very large corporations that do this work, or you have the technology that allow your own population to create this data, but also this needs from previous investment on part of public authorities. I'm currently developing some preliminary research projects on distributed ledger technology, the blockchain, and its applications in several aspects of society. And this is one of the main promises of this technology, the ability that the blockchain would allow you to get better quality data that is created by the population, by the individuals. So this could be an interesting research project for the future. Yeah. So with mobile phones and good network connection to agricultural people, so they can create the databases of what they are doing in the agricultural sector that will allow us to improve agricultural policies.
Yeah, that's very interesting indeed. As the quality of the research is very much related to the quality of the data.
Yeah.
And of course, if the data is not reliable or relevant, so and the research, especially the results and its implementation, obviously will be not much valuable as it could be. And here we got another question, and we have the raised hand. Mr. Hamidov, can you?
Hello, can you hear
Yes,
me?
please. You're online.
Well, my name is Abdullah. Well, actually, I'm using my friend's PC. Well, my question is, how could modern agriculture help reduce poverty in developing countries?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
All right. So my question is, how could modern agriculture help reduce poverty in developing countries?
Well, the answer is you cannot reduce poverty in any country if you don't have a well-functioning agricultural sector, because agriculture produces the most basic staples that will allow a basic quality of life for your population. So in this sense, if you, in any country where you have relatively sizable part of the population that is in poverty or at risk of being in poverty, food safety should be one of the first motivation of your public policy. The question is that I see that many times this is posed just as a question of technological modernization. So when in many countries, the decision makers, the authorities that have the ability to make policy, talk about how to solve the poverty problems with modern agriculture, they are thinking just in technology, just in machines, better irrigation systems, and so on and so forth. But in practice, while this is of course necessary, it's just a part of the problem. A good part of what happens in the agricultural sector relates to things that happen down in the supply chain. So in a good part, all the problems of poverty related to the agricultural sector that is not functioning well relate about distribution of the agricultural product, about the price that the product can fetch in the market. And these are problems that technology can solve, not technology applied to the field. You need technology applied to the markets and to the supply chains. And this is something that I believe maybe because of specialization, the people in charge of making agricultural policy, usually they contemplate that the realm of activity is the agriculture. So they think about the field, about the seeds, about the harvests, and how to improve the efficiency of that. And of course, there are a lot of techniques and technologies that allow you to make this more efficiently. But they don't see that once you have the product, in order to solve the poverty issues, this product has to go somewhere. It has to be distributed. It has to be sold. It has to provide income for the producers. And this is not solved with tractors, machinery, or better irrigation systems. You need to manage supply chains. You need logistics. You need to understand the working out of markets and which are the risks that this poses. This is the area where usually I'm most interested in doing research of this kind.
Thank you. And we've got the very last question here. And the participant asked regarding the data. So you mentioned that you had some issues with retrieving data for the project conducted in Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
However,
yeah.
How did you manage to overcome this issue?
Well, we usually try to complement the official data that is made available to us with restricted surveys in order to try to improve the quality of the data. My usual procedure is that once we have the data collated, we try to assemble a team of experts, both international and local, and present them the basic characteristics of the data we have available, and try to extract the ideas about which are the main problems with the data, which are the main areas where they think that the data is defective. And then we try to design the way through random sampling and small local surveys to try to improve data in those areas where it's most lacking. because of course the idea will be to be able to improve the whole database, but usually you don't have resources enough to do that. So what you try to solve is just the most flagrant problems, but creating your own data directly in the field.
So let me once again thank you for your time and for your valuable insights. We really appreciate that you spent this 1 hour with us. And I again very much hope to meet you in person, whether at our premises or at your university. And let me once again express my gratitude and wish you much success and with your research, with your current activities. And I hope that there will be also interests among our participants or our researchers, maybe governmental authorities who will be watching us to attract you as a researcher, as the consultant for the policy making. And I think that it will be very valuable for us to get some other opinions regarding the Uzbekistan as well. So if you have some words to our participants, you are welcome.
Thank you. Well, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to have this stimulant talk with you. I also hope that we will have the opportunity to cooperate in the future. I had in the past some Uzbek students, and I had the opportunity to visit Uzbekistan once. Is a country that fascinates me because of many reasons. So I really hope that I will have the opportunity to continue working with you. And to the participants in this session, what I have to say is that really the main advice that I can present to anyone that is interested in this type of questions is to really be preoccupied by the methodological issues. It's very easy to go wrong in this type of studies, and in order to do things in the right way and in being aware that doing things in the right way doesn't always give the right answer, because the questions are difficult, but what you have to do is to be very sound in the methodological phase. So this is what I usually advise everyone: focus on study the methods, and then everything will be much easier.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a nice day, Professor. And I very much hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.